Let's bring in Peter McGauran now, former Howard government minister, and Simon Banks, former senior Labor advisor, now with Hawker Britain. Gentlemen, appreciate it. Peter McGauran, first to you. You've been saying to our viewers every Monday when we catch up that Liberals who think that this is going to be easy to drag back and coalition people who think it's going to be easy to drag back should have a dose of reality because they're still behind. The polls suggest that's the case today, Peter.
Undoubtedly, Kieran, and in fact I believe the coalition will be behind every day until the 21st of May. Today's a lot of people are going to feel flat, but they've got to remember these are national polls. And in fact, the Financial Review's Ipsos poll released today has the coalition at 29% primary vote compared to News Polls 35%. Now, 29% is patently ridiculous. And I don't think anybody who's got any political judgment or mixes in the community would endorse a 29% primary vote. So that gives you an idea that national polls are not highly reliable at this stage anyway. And you've got to look at it seat by seat. And it's great to have Tom focusing on preferences because he's bringing the cause of close contest to the forefront. I've long believed that there has to be more analysis of Palmer's United Party's preferences in those very close electorates. So, yep, I can understand Liberals and coalition supporters feeling a bit flat, but this is certainly not endgame.
Yep, Simon Banks, in terms of that pre-poll in Chisholm, what did you think of that? With Gladys Liu at 3, Labor at 11, it's an ultra-marginal seat. So those things can be decisive in a seat with so few votes in play.
Yeah, I've got to say, I think most Labor strategists expected, by and large, both whether you're talking about One Nation or the United Australia Party and Clive Palmer, that they were likely to much more likely to preference the coalition than Labor. I don't think that will have come through as a big surprise. I think it'll be a much more interesting issue over in Western Australia. I think a lot of Western Australians will be quite upset to see the closeness between the Liberal Party and Clive Palmer. They know that Scott Morrison made a bad call and backed Clive Palmer over Mark McGauran. They haven't forgotten. And I think hearing that news will have a resonance over there in Western Australia. I think the more relevant issue, to be frank, and Tom spoke about it, is Clive Palmer's advertising campaign. As he quite rightly said, by this stage of the campaign 3 years ago, he'd gone wholly negative on Labor. It's still a bit of a pox on both your houses. Maybe that will change over the coming days, but it's more interesting to me as a campaigner to see that Clive has chosen not to change his advertising yet.
And Simon, your read on the debate last night, the second of the leaders' debates?
Well, I think the first thing, Kieran, is it shows why the Sky's People's Forum is the much better forum to have a debate. I mean, people do want to hear from ordinary voters. They want to hear from real people about the issues that matter to them. You know, what you saw last night, quite frankly, is from all the studies, it's the least popular version of the style of debates. It's basically an extended press conference. As I said, people want to hear from real people in their views. I don't think the argy-bargy that happened during the campaign ultimately helped either campaign. I think other parties were probably the bigger beneficiaries out of that. But I guess if there was one slight benefit out of it, Scott Morrison's been raising a question all this election campaign about whether Anthony Albanese has got the ticker. And I think he showed the Australian people that he's certainly got the ticker up against Scott Morrison last night.
Peter McGauran, a Liberal I spoke to last night, said to me that the fight or the row at that debate would push people, if anything, to the minor parties and independents. What was your assessment?
Possibly, but both of them are under pressure to be tough and strong, especially for their baked-on supporters. I can remember John Hewson told us in Shadow Cabinet in the early 90s he was never going to raise his voice, he was never going to attack Prime Minister Keating, would never speak over him, and that would follow through to the 1993 election campaigns, debates. So he was just portrayed as weak, vacillating, which he wasn't. But unfortunately, Australian politics is very combative and almost a blood sport. There's no getting away from it. If either of them let the other talk over them, I know what today's Monday quarterback assessments would have been.
Yeah, fair point. And I think, Simon, you were alluding to that in suggesting that Anthony Albanese did have to push back against some of the critiques that the Prime Minister was putting at him rather than simply cop it. But Simon, from your perspective, I guess Labor confident, but no sign of hubris given the devastation that your side of politics felt just a few years ago.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's taking anything for granted. Look, and there are still a lot of soft voters out there. I think it's one thing to look at the numbers in the opinion poll, and I guess, if you look at the numbers today, Labor supporters will be more optimistic compared with their coalition counterparts. But there are still a lot of soft voters out there who are still making up their mind. I guess the real question over this final 2 weeks is that if this trend continues, then I think we can begin to think about what the election outcome might be. I think what's going to be more interesting is what's Scott Morrison going to do to change up this debate? How is he going to change the dynamic of the discussion that people are having around their kitchen tables over the next 2 weeks? Because he needs things to change.
Peter McGauran, if the coalition is to pull it back, it's got to go through one particular seat. There needs to be a win there, and we saw some images earlier with Andrew Constance, that seat of Gilmore on the New South Wales South Coast. That's one that's got to flip from Labor to the Liberals if the coalition's a chance of holding on, Peter.
I couldn't agree more, Kieran. If they can't win Gilmore, then how do you offset certain losses, either in Western Australia, Boothby, as Andrew touched on, and possibly elsewhere, because there's often accidents. So, of course, Gilmore, they've got to bank Gilmore. If they're not banking Gilmore right now, then the election will be lost. Look, it's a hard election to watch, and it's an even harder election to analyse. It's not very exciting. It's certainly not inspirational. The Prime Minister is trying to nail down Albanese, who's trying to stay a small target. So they're sort of two boxes in a ring, clinging to each other, throwing little jabs, landing some, but nobody's got a knockout blow. Now, is that because they haven't gone for vision and for inspiration? But I can see what happened last night in the debate, and I can see what's happening every day. Albanese is diminishing himself by being a small target, but on the other hand, it is countering the Prime Minister's obvious attack strategy.
Peter McGauran, Simon Banks, great to see you both. We'll catch you next Monday.